Welcome to This Week in Creativity, where we will be exploring how to enhance your creativity. And some may ask the question, can you actually enhance your creativity? And the answer, in short, is yes, absolutely you can. Now, I'm sure that you are already working on your creative luminary assignment, and so I'm sure that you have already delved deeply into the life and experience of a famous creative person, someone who inspires you and has created or changed a field and a domain in some kind of significant way. And in delving into this life, I am sure that you have already discovered that education and training can be very important in the life of the creative. However, what I am sure that you are also learning as you are going through this process is that sometimes that education is not formal education. That oftentimes the creative desires information that is not readily available through formal education, and so seeks out the relevant information from masters or from other nuanced sources, and so is self-taught in many ways. The successful creative will usually have mentors or will have spent time in some kind of apprentice-master relationship. So what we often see, and sometimes what is important, is to remember that in enhancing creativity, it is never about being the master. It's about to never quit learning, to always increase your knowledge and your skills, and to increase your general knowledge, because that is to increase your creative potential. Now, of course, you also always want to increase your domain-related skills, but it's not just about doing the things in your field and learning how to do the creative work, but also to learn about your field's history. Learn about its philosophy, learn about its culture, learn about its origins, learn about its offshoots and subsets. Now, when I say this, I don't mean I don't just mean for the rarefied creative genius. This goes for everybody. Just to have nuance and richness in an individual's life, it's important to have a creative domain. It doesn't need to be in the traditional arts field. It can be, playing chess. It can be gardening or making bread. But have something that you learn about, that you know about, that you are really good in. And that in gaining the knowledge and skills around it, you can begin to play with it in unique ways. And this can start to energize your creative juices. And I think it's important for everyone to have an area of interest, a passion, a domain of expertise, and then to develop relationships within that domain, to have mentors, to have coaches, have a professor, have a supervisor, have a supportive colleague, have a learning community. This will nurture you naturally, and oftentimes professions require that. For example, if you are a certified counselor, part of the expectation of being a counselor in practice is to have a clinical supervisor, somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, be more creative with, in a safe place. This gives you a place to bounce these ideas off of, not just in that one profession, but in any creative pursuit. And then, of course, comes the really rewarding part of creating something awesome. And not only having some kind of finished product, but in also then engaging as a mentor, a coach, a professor, a supervisor, a supportive colleague, an active member of a learning community to help others in their pursuits, to create richness and diversity and nuance in their lives. And then, of course, the time that you commit to the domain is very important. To practice, to understand yourself, to refine your skills. It is very important to enhance your creativity. And as you recall, we've mentioned a little bit about the requirement of approximately 10,000 hours of commitment to something in order to master it. The work, talent is overrated, has suggested that simple, good, hard work, deliberate training and time and practice to the skill is essential, and as essential as the innate talent, and indeed is the key to unlocking the talent that someone may have, to move beyond, to be more than simply somebody that has possible potential to one that is actualized as a creative genius. Now, for someone that is taking up a domain later in life, they may not get their 10,000 hours in, but that doesn't matter. It shouldn't deter someone from learning, from growing, from enhancing their creativity, because the simple act of learning a new skill, of exploring a new domain, enhances and enriches life, and enhances your sense of courage to think creatively, to problem solve creatively. And this will inevitably enrich your life and the lives of those around you in surprising and oftentimes wonderful ways that are intangible. Another thing that's important in enhancing creativity is simply being able to have the courage to take a risk and be willing to possibly fall. Now, Ellen Langer's book on becoming an artist does a wonderful job here, I believe, of describing the importance of having the courage to take a risk, to having the fortitude to work through difficult times. But, as Plato has said, courage sometimes is also knowing when to walk away from a bad situation, and that's okay. Try something new. Stick with it for a while. If you feel that you're making some progress, then commit to it. But if it is so far outside of your passions and skill set that it is a waste of time, then recognize that and move on to something else. Another thing that is important to do in enhancing your creativity, according to Shelley Carsons, is to avoid prejudging ideas that you have within your own domain that you come up with on your own. Oftentimes, we are our own worst critics, and sometimes it's important to allow ourselves a space of grace so that we can grow, so that we can move along the continuum of proximal development, and we can begin to understand the domain better as well as ourselves better. We may, in the end, decide that an idea or direction is not fruitful, but take the time to explore that rather than simply prejudging and discarding an idea without thoroughly investigating it. And finally, put some thought into your chosen area. How might your area be improved or changed or innovated in some way? How might your ideas and skills be able to contribute to this new direction within your chosen area? Are there pathways that may encourage your new ideas and directions to gain traction and acceptance from others? Now, This brings us to how you might find an important question or direction to take in your creative pursuits. Something that you might want to do is to look at your domain and ask, is there a gap? What needs improvement? Or ask yourself, what bothers you about your chosen area? And then work on it, on fixing that, on filling that gap, on answering that question, on creating that work that should be part of that domain. Now, another thing that you can do, and that we have talked about a lot, is about convergent and divergent thinking. And in order to enhance creativity, of course, it's important to find the flexibility between those two. Practicing and developing your skills in divergent thought are extremely important in enhancing your creativity. And so this doesn't just mean in your field of creative work, but in many areas of life. And sometimes there are even courses online and programs that can help people to develop their divergent thinking by simply applying the principles of divergent thinking into many areas of life. Recognizing that the successful creative knows when to pick up divergent thinking and when to set it down again and use convergent thinking in order to gain some level of acceptance. So it's the ability to move flexibly between these two ways of thinking that is really so very important. But so very often we are pushed so much in the direction of convergent thinking that our divergent thinking becomes underdeveloped. So we need to be mindful of that and deliberately practice our divergent thinking. And another thing that I'm sure that you have learned already in taking this course, as you have looked at your creative luminaries, is the importance of openness to novelty as a means of enhancing your creativity. The openness to experience, the openness to new, unknown ways of doing something. Part of the personality trait of the creative genius is that openness. And this is something that we can embrace in our own lives to enhance our creativity. We can practice doing something in a new and different way. It can be something as simple as taking a different path home from work, of shopping at a different store, of going into a store that you wouldn't normally think of going into, or taking a course that you normally wouldn't consider that would be something of interest to you, and then discovering that it is an actual area of passion for you. Now, of course, there is also the need for high self-confidence, what some people will call egotism. But high self-confidence is good. It's trying to do something new, and the willingness to live in that space of contingency where you don't necessarily know what's going to happen, whether you're going to be successful or not. But really, that is what life is really all about. And so you really become a much more authentic person by going through this process. When you throw yourself into the future and see what is going to happen in a new and creative way of doing something. This can bring richness to life. Now, by doing this, I don't mean doing something silly or reckless or dangerous, but trying on new ways of being or new approaches in a domain and so on can be ways of enhancing your creativity. And then there comes something that I think is profoundly important. Identify your passion in life. And a passion isn't always necessarily something that is joyful. In fact, the word passion actually means to suffer for something. What is the thing that you are willing to suffer for? Most people spend most of their life doing things that they don't really want to do. Isn't it better to identify something that is meaningful to you, that is important to you, and do that? And recognize that sometimes life is tough and that there will be suffering, but suffering without meaning is despair. But when you have a meaning, when you have a passion, when you have a reason, then there is meaning. And suffering with meaning is just suffering. And suffering is manageable because there's going to be suffering in any life. But suffering without meaning is despair. And no one wants to live in despair. So it's important to recognize what you are passionate about. Spend more time doing those things. Be enthusiastic about your projects. Engage with your energies. Because when you engage with your energies and your attention and your effort and your time and your skill, you experience flow. And we all know that flow is the essence of a type of happiness, where the skill-challenge balance is mixed with a time dilation, is mixed with the enjoyment of the task. And you can always look back at an experience of flow and say, yes, I was happy. I may not have realized that at the time. I may have been suffering at the time. I may have been physically uncomfortable at the time. I may have been emotionally strained at the time, and yet it was worth it. It was meaningful. It was powerful. I contributed something, and I was happy. If someone can look back at the end of their life and say, I did something meaningful, I contributed something wonderful, and I was happy, that, people, is a good life. And isn't it better to live a good life than live a life doing things that you don't want to do? And when you look back in despair and ask, what was that all about? And so I encourage each and every one of you, as you look at your creative luminaries and as you think about enhancing your own creativity, to be mindful, to put in the time to identify the domain, to ask the question, to work and develop your skills, to think divergently, to get a mentor, to be open to new experiences, to enhance your motivation, to be self-confident, willing to fail at time, and to identify your passion and to live a meaningful life that is full of the nuances of creative pursuits and richness. Because this brings richness not only to your life, but to the lives of those around you. And so, in essence, enhancing your own creativity can bring about a good life. I hope you enjoyed this week. You take care. Bye-bye.